It's preparing it.
Well, this is Gary Borgendale.
Oh, no. Oh, sorry, go.
Well, we'll try it one more time. That's one of the things about this as the stand-in host. This is Gary Borgendale, and I am here with you tonight with Alpha News and First Tuesday Conservatives. Here's the opportunity. We bring conservative thoughts and voices to people in Minnesota. So we have the opportunity to act upon it and be educated as well. So joining me this evening with us is Dr. Scott Jensen. Scott is a former state senator from the Watertown area, and now he is embarked on this great journey of running for governor. And so, Senator Jensen, it's great to have you on tonight. And we are going to be talking about this legislative session and the operations of Governor Wells. So welcome, Senator Jensen. It's good to have you with us this afternoon.
Thank you, Gary. And if I could just say thank you to First Tuesday Conservatives and Alpha News. It's this kind of engagement that's going to make a difference. Minnesotans know that this is not a path that we want to be on. And the only way we get off this path is to be engaged. And as Edmund Burke said, the worst thing that we can do is to do nothing because we could only do a little. We have to do the little that we can do.
And that's right. And that's why we're here tonight. And Dr. Jensen operates with many hats. And so he still is practicing with the operation that he has in Watertown. I believe that's where your practice is out of. Is that correct? So before we get in talking about the legislative session, I want to talk a little bit about what's been happening to you and share a little bit about what's happening on your medical license, what challenges have come to you because of what you've spoken. What's happening on your medical license challenges, Dr. Jensen?
Thank you, Gary, for expressing concern. 3 times, the Minnesota Board of Medical Practice has sent me letters indicating that my license is being investigated. In each of those 3 instances, I was not allowed to know who my accuser was. Based on the correspondence from the Board of Medical Practice, I surmised that these were people who had never met me. They had never been cared for by me. It had more to do with my political positions. In a couple of the instances, it was a specific video I had done. One, I think, had said that I was not being supportive enough of masks. Another one might have been about my concerns regarding vaccines. I am a physician, and I do have thoughts about these things. I do have 12-year-old asthmatic patients who have tremendous difficulty skating up and down the ice with a mask in place. I do have patients who have had vaccine reactions and patients who are pregnant. And these are all legitimate questions. But bottom line is right now, my investigations are all over. All the charges have been dismissed. I've been checked by the Associated Press, USA Today, Facebook. Those have all been okay. TikTok did permanently ban me because I had put a video out on a Thursday regarding a 60 Minutes episode that I thought was slanted against Governor DeSantis. And that night I was told that the 300,000 followers we had garnered in less than a month were now gone.
That was on TikTok.
That was on TikTok.
So what else has been happening on social media? I want to get this understood because this is a campaign that is engaging in a lot of challenges, and we need to understand this fully, even beside the issues, how this is important. So I want to talk to a little bit more about that social media. You did mention about being banned on TikTok, and you had 300,000 followers on there. Share some of those what's happening on the other social media, Dr. Jensen.
Well, it certainly strikes terror in your heart when something like that happens, because social media is such a prominent part of how we get the word out, how we get our message out. On Facebook, I think I have some 260,000 people who follow me. And on Twitter, I think I'm approaching 40,000. So I have some 300,000 people following me on those 2 platforms. Our YouTube subscriber list has grown, and I think we're closing in on 2,000 people there. One of the things we do is we ask voters and constituents and supporters if they'll sign on to our email address book so that we're not dependent upon some of these social media platforms. And we have some 50,000 people who've signed on to our.
And what is that they can sign up for? Where is that, Dr. Jensen?
They go to our website at drscottjensen.com, DRSCOTTJENSEN.com. We ask for their email address so that we can communicate with them directly, and also so that we don't lose communication with them if a platform decides that we're not worthy of their page.
Right. And so that's one of the things I really want to make important to people, to go to Dr. Jensen's website, because then you can be connected directly with his communications. But it is an issue that conservatives are facing in this woke culture of eliminating us from the social media standpoint. So any of that connections, again, it's drscottjensen.com. Is that the right website?
That's correct. And Gary, I remember the day we came out with our launch video on March 16th, it just took off and it was just going like that. And all of a sudden it slowed down. And we don't have any factual proof, but there was substantial concern on the part of many of our team that it had been, quote, throttled. And evidently there are algorithms that platforms can use to throttle something back and not let it grow so rapidly. So we'll never know if that happened or not. But I would love people to go to drscottjensen.com and see our launch video, because I think it's a compelling video. Frankly, Gary, if you had any interest in playing it on your show, I would love to have people see it, because what we tried to do was we wanted to take 4 minutes and create a stark contrast between what would a good doctor do with his or her patient and what would a bad doctor do with his or her patient. And in the situation of the video, the patient is Minnesota.
Well, that's one of the things I remember when we had our first conversation, probably about a month ago, as I was kind of walking you through these different topics, kind of as your first foray into an interview as a governor candidate. When I started talking about that medical practice and how you view the patients, there was this energy that came out greatly in there. And I really enjoyed kind of pulling that out from you. But I'm going to move on from there a little bit. And it's important for us to connect with Dr. Jensen and his website on social media. But I want to talk a little bit about what's happened at session this year and give you some of the, how do you rate things relative to what the legislators have done, what Governor Walz has done? Let's start with the legislators. Do you have any thoughts, insights, what's happening in both the House and the Senate, since as a governor, you would have to work with both of those?
In terms of giving it a grade, that might be challenging, but I think the combined grade of the legislature would have to be a less than average grade, because they wanted to have targets for spending established a couple of weeks ago, and they finally got them done today. And there's sort of been this celebration that, yeah, we have targets. Well, I'm sorry, you're also adjourning. And now we're being told as citizens in Minnesota that, yeah, there will probably be a special session starting on June 14th. And presumably everything will be ironed out by then. But if you actually talk to the individual legislators, I think they feel pretty empty. I think they feel empty of input, frustrated, and I think not engaged by the leadership.
And that has taken place because then that negotiating is really taking place with Senator Gazelka and Melissa Hortman and the governor. It sounds like that's the three that are having the conversation, and everybody else is kind of left out in the dark. Is that how you view that?
It's absolutely the case. I was in the Senate for 4 years, and it's happened before and it's happening now. I've been in touch with probably a dozen legislators today, and they're very frustrated with it. They're frustrated that they didn't find out about this, quote, deal until sometime around 10 o'clock this morning. They're going to be adjourning, and they're just saying, we got 201 legislators, and 195 of them sit around in the dark wondering when some snippet of news is going to come through, and sometimes they learn about it
through the media. through the media. That's very much so. I think we froze up a little bit with Dr. Jensen. There, he's back with us. So we're still, unfortunately, there's not really much that has come out from the legislature yet because of what they're bogged down in. So let's talk a little bit about the governor, that he has loosened, quote, the mask mandate a bit more. Talk a little bit about his dealings with the whole emergency powers and how you view that he has overreached his powers that were necessary for our state. So let's talk a little bit about that, how you feel Governor Walz went beyond his responsibilities here.
Maybe the best way to get at that, Gary, is through a series of questions. Perhaps I could ask, do we all recognize that in the beginning, Governor Walz used the emergency powers to respond to the pandemic, and Minnesotans collectively realized that we were in uncharted territory and that they wanted to be good citizens?
Correct.
Can we all recognize that we did that? I think we can say yes. Then I think, can we recognize that the moment by moment, day by day decision-making relatively quickly gave way to week by week and month by month decision-making? Because if we can recognize that, then we can see ourselves sliding away from an emergency into an ongoing issue or an ongoing problem. And we have many of those: safety in the streets, racial relations, all those things. If we go the next step and say, well, would it be clear that it's not an emergency if the governor says that he might be willing to shed some of the emergency powers if the Republicans would give in on a couple of things that Governor Walz wants? Because in that situation, Gary, I think he just showed us his hand. This is not about emergencies. This is now just raw politics. This is a leverage tool. This is a tool that's going to be used to push the budget targets up, to get something that he otherwise wouldn't be able to get. It's an end run around the usual legislative process.
Right.
And that's what tells us that this is not an emergency and that this is inappropriate and it should never happen again.
Right. And I think the key thing that you're saying in there is that he's using his emergency powers as a negotiating tool on certain legislation. And that is not at all what this emergency powers is designed for. And so it's that seeking an unusual power for himself in there. It's I want to, if there's more I want to talk about with you with the governor, but I think we may have more conversation just because of it's kind of been a mush right now. I want to talk more about what some of the issues that you're listening to as you're going out on the campaign trail. But is there more that you want? I think the governor is already fundraising against you. I think I've seen some fundraising come out about how bad you are. So I guess you at least got on his radar. So I don't know if that's good or bad, but at least there. Other things on the governor comment?
I think that data and scientists and physicians around the country are starting to come to the conclusion. I wouldn't say it's a consensus, but many are coming to the conclusion that the lockdowns were absolutely fruitless and the wrong thing to do. School closures did nothing good. And the fact of the matter is the school closures hurt the people who were already hurting the most.
Oh,
We're
yes.
seeing achievement gaps, learning disabilities, we're seeing
Nutrition.
increase. We're seeing the collateral damage include decreased rates of vaccination, increased hunger, increased tuberculosis, delay in diagnosis, reduction in ongoing screening tests such as mammograms and colonoscopies. I have had patients, Gary, who had their breast cancers diagnosed 9 months later than they would have to have, because their procedure that they needed to have was considered an elective procedure, and basically the hospitals were shut down. These are the things that I think came from Governor Walz's policies. So I think two big ones would be the lockdowns and the school closures. But I also think that the governor has to own the fact that his policies created a pipeline of active COVID-19 into nursing homes, such that we were nation leading in the percentage of deaths in nursing homes for many months. And I think we also have to recognize that the decision to buy a $7 million structure that has a leaky roof, that's never seen a cadaver, but to buy that building to be used as a morgue is just confounding. When I heard that decision, I made some phone calls to hospital morgues, to nursing, to funeral homes, to morticians, and I said, are we at a crisis point? Is this an issue? Not one said it was an issue. So I think that there was this hasty, wasteful decision-making. And I think Governor Walz at some point in time is going to have to stand and justify what he did, why he did it.
And there's a lot of issues, you talk about the nursing home issue, the school education issue, the nutrition issue. You haven't really talked about the suicide and the mental health issue. I think those are all outcomes that have taken place under Governor Walz. I'm going to skip forward a little bit with you, Scott, if I may. So you've been out now on the campaign trail since March. And so what are, obviously some of the issues will be what we talked about relative already, but what are those issues? What are people talking to you about that you've been out on the campaign trail, Dr. Jensen?
First off, constituents want to know that science is going to be used to deal with challenges and crises and not political science. They're tired of the professional politicians. They just don't feel like they're believable. Second is safety is a huge issue, both in terms of private residences, small businesses, nurses, nursing homes, students. Safety is a big issue. It's interesting that one of the fastest cohort groups growing in terms of gun purchases are women. Another issue is absolutely going to be secure elections. If we can't know that we have a fair election process, it's going to be difficult to build the bridges necessary so that we can once again be the state that we want to be. We got to go back to students as well. And across the state, I'm seeing people say, why are we just throwing more dollars at this problem? It isn't fixing anything. Let's stop being generous by funding broken institutions. Let's fund kids. Let's make sure that parents can have choice in terms of where might their child learn best. Students and education is just a huge issue. And I think student choice, school choice, this matters. People are concerned about the rate of spending. They know that in 2010, we had a $30 billion biennial budget, and now it's $52 billion or thereabouts. That's almost a 75% increase in little more than a decade. And lastly, people want their Second Amendment rights defended passionately. They want red flag legislation absolutely stomped on, and they're right. They want broader latitude in terms of being able to stand your ground, and they're right. If you're minding your business and you're carrying legally and you find yourself in serious harm's way, the last thing I would want you to do is to feel that you have to retreat. I would want you to be able to do what's necessary to protect you and the loved ones you are with. So I think Second Amendment rights, I think hopefully every Minnesotan realizes how important it is. And then there's a whole nother set of issues, Gary, in terms of freedom of speech and the whole concept of Dr. Jensen might have gotten canceled off of TikTok. Maybe he shouldn't have put an inflammatory post on there. But I would go back to, I think it was Martin Niemöller in World War II said, I didn't go with these folks because I wasn't a part of them. So I didn't protest with them. And I didn't defend this group. And I didn't do this. And when they came for me, there was no one left. We're doing this. If you think that because you're not on the radar screen and it didn't happen to you, that it's okay, that's a dangerous thought process. These are the issues I'm hearing about, Gary.
And that's really a key issue right now as I'm listening to conservative intellectuals. The Republic is very much of a concern. And that's where we have to engage in this and speak forward and get active in there. Now, Dr. Jensen, have you started to have any volunteer groups that people could go to your website and begin to volunteer for different things, Dr. Jensen?
Gary, there's a saying, a statement by Johann Goethe, something like this: when you finally make the commitment and you really pledge yourself to something, things will happen that you could never have guessed. And that's what I experienced. We have been so gratified. We're closing in on raising $500,000 in little
Great.
more than 2 months. We have 1,000 volunteers signed up to knock on doors, put signs up. We have 50,000 people on our email list. We have 4,000 unique donors. I got a donation the other night, Gary, that just touched my heart. It was from a person in California who I've never met for $3. They wanted to be a part of the team. They didn't have a lot of money. And after the credit card company took its share, I think we got $2.78 or something. But these people wanted to be a part of our movement. A few days earlier, I'd gotten a donation for $500 from someone, and I didn't know who they were, and I wanted to reach out and thank them. So I asked the team, can you get me a little information? This was a person who does not normally consider themselves to be Republican. They're an independent or a Democrat, but they've had enough. These kind of experiences are telling me that there's
a hunger.
There's a hunger. It's almost like Mary Poppins, where she said, the wind is a-changing. And I think the wind's changing, Gary. People are passionate, they're engaged, and I don't think this is going to sputter out. I think they know that we're fighting for our very freedom.
Right. So where can they go to give money to your campaign, Dr. Jensen?
The easiest way is to just go to drscottjensen.com, and they can do it online, or there's also an address there if they'd like to send a check. But drscottjensen.com, and we want people to join our movement. This isn't about Scott Jensen, and it's not about just our team. This is about a set of values that we honor and uphold. This is the Ronald Reagan: faith, family, freedom, wisdom of the founding fathers, limited government, lower taxes, protect life from beginning to end, hold high the values of the individual, celebrate exceptionalism, recognize that peace comes from strength, and never stop dreaming. These are the things that Reagan taught us. And these are the things that people are saying, we want these elevated.
Right.
We want these elevated. And if Scott Jensen is going to be the voice, then we're on his team. And from my perspective, I'm saying, please lend me your voice, because it's your voice with my voice and your voice with your voice that's going to get this done.
And exciting to talk with you now, Dr. Jensen, because of our first interview, I can tell you've been on the stump for several times here now, speaking this way, because this stuff kind of rolls off your tongue as opposed to the other times that we've had you on. But that's part of the purpose of that. So one of the things, so you've talked a little bit about these sweet donor stories. Do you have stories relative to people across the state of Minnesota about how they've gravitated to your campaign for any of these issues that you've talked about from outstate Minnesota here in the Twin Cities? These stories really help cement your campaign that way. And there's some stories that you might be able to share that way from people that have engaged or the support for you on the campaign trail.
I'll tell 3 stories real quickly. The other night, my wife and I were out for dinner, and he told me later on, a young lad came over and tapped me on the shoulder and said, Dr. Jensen, I'm sorry to interrupt, but my name is Andy, and I just wanted to tell you that I really appreciate you trying to make it so I don't have to wear a mask. I can't breathe when I wear a mask. And I asked him how old he was. He was 11 years old, a lanky little guy. And when he walked away, my wife said, I think I'm going to cry. That's one story. Another story was, we had a rally of 500 to 1,000 people at the Capitol today to protest the notion of mandating that children receive COVID-19 vaccinations. And there was a woman there who was probably in her 70s, maybe her 80s, and she was in a wheelchair. And I thanked her for coming. And she'd driven some hour away, for an hour away. She'd been put in a van, and she wanted to come and lend her support. I thought that was unbelievable.
This was at the governor's mansion? At the governor's mansion?
This was on the lawn of the Capitol.
Okay, okay.
Now, we had a dozen legislators come out and speak. We had some 500 to 1,000 people. And this was all about, these are our children. These are not the state's children. We choose what our children will receive and not receive. But the last story I was going to tell you about was a couple of weeks ago. I had a patient I was seeing here in the office, and they were a little bit gloomy. And I said, what's up? And he said, Doc, I feel terrible. that it seems like our whole society has shut down because they think I want them to just because I'm old. And this guy was probably 88 years old, sharp as a tack. He said, don't do that for me. He said, I've lived a full life. When I go, I'll join my Lord. He said, my grandchildren and my great grandchildren are being decimated by supposedly all these people who are watching out for me. They're not doing anything for me, and I don't appreciate it. And this person just spoke with the quiet courage of common sense, and it just touched my heart.
Yeah. You know, and that's the important thing of continuing to share these stories, Scott, because people gravitate to stories, you know, and I'm a follower of Jesus Christ, and he used parables all the time like that to convey the message. And so that's really good from that standpoint. One of the things I think what we'll need to do, Scott, since the legislators and the governor haven't got their business done yet, we'll have to probably rejoin probably later on, maybe in June. I don't know how soon they'll get their business done, but we'll have to talk a little bit more about it. But I want to take kind of this opportunity now and to really give you that time for that kind of closing stump speech, if you will, why people should be supporting Scott Jensen and how they can come and be part of the team of Dr. Scott Jensen for governor. Go ahead, Dr. Jensen.
Well, thank you, Gary. In my household, we have had a mini miracle over the last 18 months. My wife has had 4 major surgeries. She's had a tumor removed from the back of her sinuses, which was benign. She's had her neck rebuilt with 3 artificial discs put in, and the neck is fused. She's had her shoulder replaced. She's had her knee replaced. Along the way, she got COVID. She's retired from a very exceptional veterinary practice. She has a tumor in her brain that we cannot get at, but we'll just live with it. And we'll monitor it every 90 days, and it's not changing. So it may be something that's been there for years and we just didn't know about it. But it's a miracle. My wife feels better today than she has in a decade. And she is all in. She and I have both had a fire born in our belly because of what started to happen 14 months ago. When I first cried foul about the death certificates, Gary, I wasn't trying to be any hotshot. I wasn't trying to be a whistleblower. I just saw something that was wrong and said, hey, this isn't right. But from then forward, I became this incredibly investigative doctor. I was investigated for everything. I could barely order a hamburger at McDonald's and someone's going to investigate me. And along the way, I had some giants come to my side and defend me. People I would never have guessed because I didn't know them. Tony Robbins and Dr. Drew and Simone Gold and Laura Ingraham and Rush Limbaugh, Tucker Carlson, Fox and Friends, BBC, left side, right side, middle side. I had so many people come to our defense. And even more than that, I had everyday heroes, people like you, Gary, that are so decent, so willing to throw a prayer my way, that Mary and I found that we were on a path that we could do nothing else other than do what we're doing. We are going to speak truth over fear, not because we're not frightened, but because this is the path we've been given. Esther 4:14, we have thought that we are in the position we're in for such a time as this. And so we are running. My wife calls it the great adventure. I call it, let's go meet Minnesota. But what you're going to see from this campaign is you are going to see transparency. You are going to see respect. You're not going to see me calling people rocks and cows or 19-year-old cooks. You're going to see a unique candidate, a candidate that isn't a professional politician. You're just going to see a guy who grew up in Sleepy Eye and likes being a family doc. He's not looking for a new career. He's going to step away from his community so he can solve some problems and elevate the values that we think we need and want to govern us. But along the way, you're also going to see that I've been willing to speak for my patients, and now I'm asking, can I speak for all Minnesotans? And as we do it, we're going to trailblaze the issues. We're going to take a page from President Trump's playbook. We're going to talk about the hard issues. President Trump may have been scoffed at when he said that he could talk about NATO or NAFTA or DACA or the wall. You know what? That's who this campaign is going to be about. We're going to take a page from President Trump and we're going to say, we're going to moderate the social media stuff because he does it way differently than I do. But when it comes to the issues, when it comes to the policies, we're going to respect what President Trump taught us. And we're going to talk about the hard issues. And that's what this campaign is going to be about. But I tell people every day, Gary, that there's this problem, this 25 statewide losses in a row. We've got to change that. And the only way we change that is if we focus on electability. We can't keep doing what we're doing and expect something different to happen. That's insanity. We need to run a different kind of candidate. We need to run a candidate that can bring some fresh energy, that can energize the base, but can also energize the people that consider themselves in the independent party. We need to throw a bigger tent out there, like Ronald Reagan said. And when we do, we need to make certain that minorities feel honored, that moms in the suburbs feel engaged, and that millennials are invited into the conversation. I tell crowds all the time, look around at the millennials because they're the ones who are going to decide which nursing home bed you get. So you better respect them. That's what we're going to do. And along the way, we're going to ask you over and over again, please lend us your voice, because your voice and our voice, we can create the groundswell movement that it's going to take to flip a blue state red. And when we do that, and when we win, it's not going to be, we're going to pay you back. It's going to be thoughtful, Christ-like leadership, servant leadership. And it's going to be building bridges. And it's going to be to try to create sustainable solutions. And we're not going to end the session every year with big omnibus bills and special sessions and targets that were supposed to be done nearly a month ago, not done. That's what we're going to do. So I'm asking everybody, lend us your voice.
That's a great, Scott. And again, to donate to your campaign, they can go to drscottjensen.com. They also can go there to be able to volunteer as well. And then I presume that you'll be having different events that you will be at, so people can look at different events and how they can join in them as well. Is that right, Scott?
Not only is that right, Gary, but it's profound. What you're speaking to is the whole issue of people want to know what's going on in the campaign. We've gotten that feedback. So I'm going to start doing a Sunday or a Saturday video sharing my schedule for the coming week, where I might have some public appearances so people can come out. We did that today with the rally on the Capitol lawn. Tonight I'm in Buffalo at 7:30. We'd love people to come out, because when we come out and we connect and we touch each other's lives, and energy sparks from that. And that's what we got to be about.
Well, that's good. Thank you, Dr. Jensen. We will have to get you on again as the legislative session maybe finally comes to an end, and so we can have a viewing of that, because we have to deal with the issues that have been created for us as we go forward with this campaign as you run for governor of the state of Minnesota. This is Gary Borgendale. I'm your guest host this evening as we talk about Alpha News and First Tuesday Conservatives, where we bring conservative voices across the state of Minnesota to let them speak and hear their thoughts. We can change this state. It's through their intellectual ideas and through our engagement that we will change this state. This is a partnership for all of us to work together. And Scott Jensen is leading that charge as he runs for governor here of the state of Minnesota. So with that, we will part. Dr. Jensen, thank you very much for being part of us. It's good to see this progression, just as I've done this interview with you, and to see that more profound emphasis. You nailed these issues when I talked about that as well. So thank you very much, Scott. It's great to have you on, and look for the next opportunity for us.
Thank you, Gary, for touching our campaign.
And just one other note that we'll have another program tonight at 6:30, and that's with Jonathan Lyles. So stay tuned to another one coming up after this, and you can go from there. So thank you very much, and have a good night, and God bless the state of Minnesota.